Hello guys, I'm back with part 3 in the series, and today, like I said, I'm going to be showing you the different summonings and all that palaver and how it basically rules. So basically, you might see the screen slightly different this time, and this is what's called the field. And basically the field is split into two halves. So on the website we're on Dueler Network, it kindly shows us that it designates the area into red and blue. Don't worry about all this stuff, I'll go through this in a minute. But the red zones are mine and the blue zones are his. So before we get into anything, I'm going to explain the different zones. So the top 5 here, these first 5, ignore this one and this one for now. These ones here, these 5, these are called the monster card zones, and these are where your monsters go. So remember, we talked about normal monsters, effect monsters, fusions, exceeds, blah 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 blah, all the monsters. They all go in this zone. Okay, and the zones below them, which are these 5 here, these ones here, these are your spell trap zones. So this is where all your spells and traps go. So like remember the greenish ones and the purple ones, purple pinky ones. So the piles next to these, so this zone here is another spell trap zone. It's called the field spell zone, and that's where I remember when I'll pick them up in a second because I've got the deck here. They go there, and then this is the graveyard, and this is the remove from play zone. So we'll go over those in a minute. And the last zone besides your deck is your extra deck, and this is where, if I show you, this is where all these guys go, like the synchros, the fusions, the exceeds. They all go in this pile here next to the spell traps. This is your deck here, which is all the cards we went through. As you can see here, there's all the cards we went through. I added a couple to show you some different examples because you need to have a minimum of 40. So when you build your deck, you need to have a minimum of 40 cards, which we've got. You can have up to 60 cards in your deck if you really want to, but 40 is the best number you want because, well, I'll go over that later on. And like I said, remember we said first one to reduce your opponent's life points to 0 wins, and you start off with 8,000, so that's represented here. I've got 8,000 and my opponent has 8,000. So that's basically that, and then you have your different phases here which we'll go through. And then when you're playing, you normally have different tools such as a coin. So like there we have a coin, and we have a dice, because I should have got examples of these, but some different cards require you to roll dices and flip coins. And some cards require counters as well, which are other stuff we need to go over, but in today's episode we don't need to. So before each player starts, each player draws their 5 cards. So here's my 5 cards, so I'm going to draw my 5 now. So your deck is first shuffled, which you saw me do beforehand. I shuffled it, and then you draw your 5 cards. Whoops, I drew too many, so I'll put you back. So that's your first 5 cards. Each player's not supposed to look at your cards first, but yeah, and you basically decide who's going to go first. So you either do rock paper scissors, or you roll a dice, and whoever gets the highest. So let's say I roll first. I get a nice lovely 1, and you get a number 3. So you would win. So you would choose who goes first and second. But let's just say I won, so I'm going first. So during each of your turn, at the start of your turn, before you do anything, you have to draw a card. So this is what's called the draw phase, which is represented here, which is called DP, which is the draw phase. So you draw for your turn, and you draw a card every single of your turns. You don't draw during your opponent's turn. You draw during your turn. And you have to do this unless the card tells you not to do so, such as Reckless Greed, which I showed you in the last video. But this would be your hand. And remember, like I said, there's lots of different types of summoning, which we're going to go over here. So if I hover over 7 coloured fish, you can see we have a couple different things. We have normal summon, we have set, special summon, or S summon to graveyard, blah 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 blah. And again, we're going to go over all of these, but let's go over normal summon first. We went through this before, and basically you get 1 normal summon per turn. So you can normal summon 7 coloured fish if you want to. And that's basically summons it in attack mode. This is attack mode. So now, after your draw phase, let me just put this back to hand before we go into this any further. We go into standby phase. This is represented here by SP. And standby phase is when you give your opponent or yourself to respond to something before you start making your plays. So this is where you give your opponent a chance to respond with a card such as maybe Reckless Greed, for example, like we went through before, like a random trap card, like to respond before you play any of your cards. Okay, and that's basically what it is. Standby phase, it only lasts like 5 seconds. You ask if your opponent wants to respond. If they say no, then you say yes or no if you want to respond. Most people don't, so you just go into your next phase, which is called main phase 1. And this is the most important phase in the game, and this is where the most card interactions happen, and this is where you get to do your different summons, and you can do different things in this phase. So for example, I want to summon 7 coloured fish, so I want to normal summon it. And remember, you can only do 1 normal summon per turn, so I can't normal summon 7 coloured fish and then go normal summon Ambulance Roid, and then normal summon Dark Magician. You know, you can't just go, oh, I want to drop my whole hand, normal summon, all blah, 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 blah. So you can't do that. You can only do 1 normal summon per turn. And if you don't have to normal summon if you don't want to. You can just not do anything if you want. You can say end turn and go to your opponent's turn if you really want to, which obviously is not. It has its advantages in some certain scenarios, but in most cases that's not a good play. But instead of your normal summon, you can do what's called a set, which I'll show you here, and that is called a set, and that basically puts the monster face down in defense mode. And like I said, I tried to explain this in the first video. This is defense mode. You can also have face up defense mode as well, so that's also defense mode. But this is set defense mode. So obviously I know what this card is, but if I set it, my opponent wouldn't know what this card is because it's face down. They can't see it. I can see it, but they can't see it. Okay, so they wouldn't know what that is. So if they have, say, this guy on their field, Rescue Roid, they might be scared to attack into it because they might take damage. So let's say for example, this has 2,000 defense. It doesn't, but let's just say it does, and they attacked with this. Mine would then flip up, and they would take 400 damage. And that's basically so setting has an advantage because this is where you can get clever with the kind of poker aspect, is where you can bluff. So you can set cards like this, and they might. Obviously, setting this card isn't probably the greatest play because it's got more attack than it does defense. It only has 800 defense. So setting this probably isn't a good idea. So flips. So if we can, it'd be better to normal summon it. So I'll show you again. It's better to just normal summon it. So that's basically the difference between set and normal summon. And like normal summon, you can only use 1 set per turn, but you can't normal summon and then set in 1 turn. You can only do 1 or the other. It's your choice. So you can normal summon 7 coloured fish, or you could set Ambulance Roid. It's your choice. You can do 1 or the other. So that's basically that. There's other types of summon which we're going to go over in a sec. But let's say, for example, right, let's say that this guy's on this field. I can't put it over there, but you know, let's just say it is for now. Actually, I've got an idea. I have an idea. Let's just grab out this guy for now. Actually, no, let's get out. Who's a good example? Oh, I should have thought of this. Actually, well, let's just do you. Let's do you. So change control. So my opponent has this card on their field, and I have this card on my field, 7 coloured fish. So if we attack, which I'll go over in a second. You have to go into a different phase. And this is where the ambient fish would attack my 7 coloured fish, right? So obviously Dueling Network highlights the card's text, makes it bigger so it's easier to see. So you can see it's 2400 by 2000. So if you look on here, 2400 attack, 2000 defense, and mine has 1800 attack and 800 defense. And we went over this in the first video. And basically, if these 2 cards were to fight, this one would win because it has more attack than my card. So mine would die. So I would take 400, 4, 5, 600 points of damage. So you can do this here. So you would die 600 points of damage. And how you would do this in real life is you could use a calculator and score it on that, which I can show you if you want to. It's a little clever trick you can do on a calculator. Or you could write it down on notes on a piece of paper with a pen. Say your name's Jeff and you're playing against Frank. You can put J and then F and then 8,000, 8,000, and you can take damage off if you're good, if you can calculate it, or you can just remember in your head, which normally is not a good idea, and you're not supposed to do that in tournaments because that's where mistakes happen. So it's best to do it on paper or a calculator. When you're playing in tournaments, most people prefer you to do it on paper, but I prefer a calculator because I'm lazy. So, but anyway, going back to this example when we attacked, he won, so I took 700 points of damage off my life points, so you can see there. So I've dropped to 74. So not only do I take the damage, but my guy dies. So mine goes to the graveyard, which is where cards that you've used or have been destroyed go. So I can no longer use this card unless a card says so, which I didn't get an example of, which I should have, but oh well. So that would win the fight. Okay, and that's basically how that works. So, but again, if we just get it back to the field just for now, just for an example, I could, is that a machine? Yeah. Let's say I normal summon this guy instead for my turn. Oops. I could then activate 7 coloured slots and equip it to this guy, because he's a machine when we went through this last video, and then he gains attack and defense. I don't even know what this card does fully. Yeah, okay, cool. So that will equip to him. He would be at 1,000 attack, which is still not great. So that obviously is not the smartest play to do against that card, but you could do that if you wanted to. And equip cards, remember, like I said, they equip to a monster of your choosing according to what they say, and they go in your spell trap zones and they stay in your spell trap zone. So if I get a different spell card like where's a good example? Feather of the Phoenix, that's a good example. Let's go with the same example, say, put this back in my hand, and I summoned 7 coloured fish, and you killed my 7 coloured fish, so my 7 coloured fish is dead. So now I could play, alright, I've gone over main phase 1, let's go on to the next phase before I do this next one. So this is the battle phase, which is represented here, BP, and each player has one battle phase. And once you end the battle phase, you can no longer go back into that battle phase in the same turn. Yeah, you can only do one battle phase per turn. And that is the same for all these phases. You can't go rewind into a draw phase or standby phase once you've left that phase. That's it. You get one chance in that phase and that's it. So once we've gone into main phase, you go into battle phase. And that's where your attack's involved. So this where we did this calculation here, and we did this damage. And I obviously lost the fight. So that's what happens in this phase. But there is one slight thing you have to remember. So remember, I started this game, and you cannot attack on your first turn, and that is the reason being is because I could draw for my turn, summon 7 coloured fish and attack, and you haven't even had a turn yet, which is not fair. So to counteract that, the game designers decided you can't enter the battle phase on the very first turn, but after this very first turn, then everyone can attack. So something just to keep in mind there. So I obviously can't click on it now because this is the first turn, but normally I would be able to click on this, and this is where this fight would happen. And you could also say if I don't have a monster here and he does have this and it's his turn, he could attack me. He doesn't have to attack a monster, he can attack me. So if he attacks me, I will take a solid 2,400 points of damage, which is because he has 2,400, I had 74, and it says it here. I lost 2,400 life points, and obviously I go down to 5 grand. And you don't have to attack a monster, you can attack the opponent, but if I do have my 7 coloured fish on the field, you can't attack me because my 7 coloured fish is defending me, it's on the field. You can't attack a player if they have a monster here. If I have this here and this here, you can attack me because there's no monster blocking the attack. This is where cards like Mirror Force come into play, which are quite useful cards to have because they can protect you. So if I have 2 set cards like this and he attacks, I can then activate my Mirror Force that's been set on the field and destroy that. then that will go to his graveyard, which I can't do because it's under his control, and that will be there. So, and that's basically how that works. Mirror Force is a pretty handy card. So, but yeah, moving on. So after battle phase, that's basically everything that happens in battle phase. Trap cards can be used during battle phase, as well as quick play spells such as the examples I used before, such as Book of Moon and this card, Space Typhoon. These are two good examples of quick play spell cards. I can activate this and activate this. Obviously these have certain requirements, so this destroys one spell or trap on the field. So he hasn't got any cards here, so that wouldn't be a good idea to do that, because I'd have to kill one of my own, which is bad. Because generally you do not want to kill your own cards, which is a very bad idea, or a mentality to go into a game saying, I want to kill my own Mirror Force, yeah. So you wouldn't want to play this, so you could put that face down instead. But if I wanted to save this for later, I could respond with Book of Moon instead, and that would put this guy, like I showed you before, I can put this guy face down instead. So that's what Book of Moon does. It doesn't have to put this guy down, it can put any monster face down, including my own. And remember, this can be used during your opponent's turn and in battle phase. And one more thing to keep in mind, normal spell cards like Feather of the Phoenix and this card can't be used during the battle phase unless they state they can. Like, for example, if this card said this card can be used or only can be used during the battle phase, then you can play it during the battle phase. Simples. But for example, this card says during each of your standby phases, so for example, you know the standby phase is this one, the one after you draw. If I draw, then we go into standby phase, this card will then kick in if it's face up on the field, and I get to put one A counter on one face up monster you control, or your opponent controls. So you could move this is the counter here, so I could move a counter onto that, and that basically says there's a counter on him. And that they only count as though they're just to show you and represent, so you keep track. But yeah, I'm rambling quite a lot. So after the battle phase, you go into what's called main phase 2, which is the second main phase. You have two main phases, main phase 1, main phase 2. Main phase 1 is before battle phase, and main phase 2 is after battle phase. So this is where you get chance to do other things after you've attacked or whatever. So if you, say for example, I didn't normal summon this 7-coloured fish in the main phase 1, I could then normal summon it in main phase 2 because I haven't used my normal summon yet. So I could normal summon it, or I could set it during the main phase 2 if I really wanted to. Obviously, that in this current situation on the first turn, that doesn't offer you any advantage doing it in main phase 1 or main phase 2. It's the same thing. So main phase 2, you can do it's exactly the same as main phase 1. But it doesn't give you an additional normal summon to your main phase 1. You only have one normal summon or set per turn. So if I normal summon in main phase 1, I can't normal summon or set again in main phase 2, or vice versa. So remember, and you can't rewind, so I can't go back into main phase 1 after main phase 2. That's just how things work. So the last phase after main phase 2 is called EP, which is end phase. And end phase, if you're a smart person, you can tell end means end, and you can see under here end turn. So that end phase basically ends your turn. It's very similar to the standby phase. It gives your opponent chance to respond to something before they have their turn. So you go end phase, do you have any response? And then they might, in most cases they'll say no, and then you can say you might respond with something like, I don't know, Book of Moon maybe, and put that face down in the end phase rather than in the main phase. So that's basically how it works. And then after the end phase, it rewinds and goes to their turn, and they do the same thing. They go draw phase, they go standby phase, any response, they respond if any. Then main phase, they do their stuff. Battle phase, they attack. Main phase 2, they do their stuff again, and then end turn. Then it's on a loop. But remember, once you end their turn, they go AP, they go draw phase, they draw their turn, and they do all their stuff, and they end the turn. Then it's your turn, it loops, so it goes back to DP, and then you draw for your turn, so I draw another card. Okay, and that's basically it. That's basically how the game works. But like I said, there's a couple of other zones that I needed to go through with you, like, let me get a field spell, because field spells go in a different zone. And I put one card in here as an example, I believe. which I'm not seeing. Oh, it's in my hand, that's why. Doop. So field spells like this one, remember it's the little cross section. I think I can get a picture of it, let me see. There it goes, that's that symbol there, that's the field spell card. These go in their zone here. And then as you can see it changes the picture of the board. In real life obviously that wouldn't happen because magic doesn't exist. Well, at least we know of, but anyway. This card will obviously go here, which is above your extra deck. And when you're playing in real life, you don't have to obey by these rules. You can put them like on the top of the, like over here if you want. You can put them here. You don't have to put your deck here because if you're left-handed, it'll feel more comfortable for you to have your deck over here, which you're perfectly allowed to do. You can arrange this however you want, as long as you obey by these. That you can't give yourself more zones. You can have 5 zones, 5 spell trap zones, graveyard zone, remove from play zone, which you haven't gone over yet, field spell zone, extra deck zone, blah 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 blah. And you can arrange this how you want, however you feel comfortable. Some players like me, I have my deck up here sideways, so it's easier to draw, which I'll have to show you on on physical camera rather than on here, because you can't rearrange stuff there. But that's how some players like. Some people like it upside down. You know, you basically arrange it how you feel comfortable. You don't have to, but this is the basic layout that everyone knows. Well, everyone learning the game will know, which is you. You'll know this is the first zone you know. But you can change this how you want, as long as your monsters are on top of your spell traps, and you can position your graveyard and your deck and your remove from play zone where you want, wherever you feel comfortable. But anyway, that was just me rambling a little bit. The field spell card, you can play it straight away if you want. Or you can set it. You don't have to play it straight up, just like you can do with monsters. You can play them straight up if you want to. So okay, so let's go back, rewind. So remember when this card here, ambient, whatever you call it, fish beast, killed my 7-coloured fish. Mine died. I took 400 points of damage, and it's sent to the grave. So I could go into main phase 2. And I can activate Feather of the Phoenix, which remember when we went through cost, which is discard 1 card, so I can get rid of one of these, maybe. Let's get rid of this one, for example. So that goes to the graveyard because it's discard. So when you discard it, always goes to the grave because you're getting rid of a card. You don't want that card anymore. And then you target, if you read it, you target 1 card in your graveyard and return that to the top of your deck. So I get to look in my grave so I can put him on top of my deck. And the advantage to doing that is when I draw for my turn, you can obviously guess that that's going to be 7-coloured fish, so that I would draw that next turn, so I could reuse it later on. But after you've used that and everything's resolved, that then goes to the graveyard. So say for example my opponent played that, I could then respond with Solemn Judgment. So say I have this here. Let's get rid of some of these because we don't need these anymore. Let's just put these in the graveyard to make room. You played, just imagine, right? Blah 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 blah. Let's put this back on the field. This is on his field, right? Just picture this card is on his field. So he discarded his card to activate this. I could then activate my Solemn Judgment, which the cost for this is to pay half your life points. There's no negotiating. Once you've played it, you have to do that. So half of 5,000 is 2,500. So I would pay half my life points, which is a pretty heavy cost. So you've got to use this card sparingly, and then that would negate this card. So this would then would not put the 7-coloured fish on top of the deck. It would just cancel out. But you still have to discard because that was a cost. So I discarded this. There is no negotiation about that. You have to discard that. So that would go to the grave. I would not get to put that on top of the deck, and that would also go to the grave, and that would go to the grave. Okay, so there's one more card I want to go through, which is Dimensional Fish, and this is a continuous card. Continuous, remember, like I said, like we went through the different types of cards before. This is a continuous card, and you can see it's the infinite 8-digit sign. And basically, what this card does is any monster sent to the grave is removed from play instead. So if we go back to the very start, when 7-coloured fish was attacked by Ambient Beast, and the 7-colored fish would die and it would go to the graveyard. But we have Dimensional Fissure on the field, which basically says any monster sent to the grave is banished instead. So basically, instead of him going to the graveyard, he would get banished, which is a different zone to the graveyard, which is above it. In most cases, you again, like I said before, you can rearrange your different zones accordingly to how you prefer. But on Dueling Network on here, you can't do that, so it goes here. And basically, you can't touch these cards. These cards are out of the game. They're no longer in play. The only way you can use these cards if a card says so. So there's a couple cards. There's not many, but there's a couple cards which I didn't get an example of. But for the most parts, these cards are now out of play. So I can't use a card like Feather of the Phoenix to add this to the top of my deck because it's not in the graveyard. It's out of play. It's out of the game. It's no longer accessible. So that's what that does. And doing this has its certain attributes. So for example, no, I don't want to do that. For example, if we get Mystic Tomato out, if we read him, it says when it's destroyed by a battle and sent to the grave. So if he attacked Mystic Tomato, it would go to the grave, and that would add to its effect. But we have D-Fissure on the board, which is a shortened version of its name, Dimensional Fissure. It would be removed. And by it being removed, that no longer fulfills its requirements because it needed to go to the graveyard to trigger its effect. It was destroyed, yeah, but it was not sent to the grave, so it was removed from play, which means it doesn't get its effect. But let's say D-Fissure isn't here, it would then be sent to the grave instead. So it got attacked, it went to the grave, that would trigger its effect, and that lets me summon a dark monster with 1500 or less attack, which would be an example, would be Crebones. I would summon Crebones, because he's a dark and he's got 15 or less attack, which is 1200. And then you could also then play your Feather of the Phoenix if you really wanted to discard the Dark Magician, and then put the Mystic Tomato back on top of your deck if you really wanted to, for example. And then on your next turn you draw it, and there you go. And that's basically how that works. So cards like Dimensional Fissure that I just showed you that remove stuff from play. Here, this card here, it has its usages. To most people, like beginning off, they'll say, "Oh, that card's shit. Why would I want to play that?" It has its usages. I'll just explain. It cancels out cards like Mystic Tomato any cards that need to go to the grave. It also stops certain cards like Feather of the Phoenix, for example, from being activated because it says discard one card and then that well, actually no, not Feather of the Phoenix, but some cards that say discard one card to the graveyard, you can't activate that while D-Fissure is on the board because the card you're discarding might be a monster card, and if it's a monster card it can't be discarded to the graveyard because you have D-Fissure on the board. So you wouldn't be able to play this while D-Fissure's on the board, but Feather of the Phoenix here, it says discard one card. It doesn't matter where that card goes. So I could just discard Mystic Tomato from my hand, and that would get banished instead of going to the grave, and then I could put maybe Solemn Judgment to the top of my deck. And then when I draw for my turn, I'd draw the Solemn Judgment. And then this would go to the grave. And that's basically the gist of how things work. And this is where the tactics come into the game. So this is where we'll go over some more tactical things. I might record I've actually already got a game recorded which I'll do not a live commentary, I'll do a commentary over saying what's going on throughout the game as it progresses through, I think, which will be my next video. But this is part 4, I think, so I've got 4 videos recorded that I've all done at once, so I haven't read your comments if you've posted any yet, which I'll address in the next one. I'm not going to record any more for today because yeah, that's what I'm going to do. But yeah, so I hope you enjoyed today's video. One more thing I just want to go through quickly. I just forgot. We're at 29 minutes, so I'll do it nice and quick. If I have Ambulance Roid and these guys in the field, I could then tribute these to summon Dark Magician. But remember, we have D-Fissure on the board, so these will get banished instead of going into the grave. So these go to the graveyard, and then I normal summon my Dark Magician. And remember, this is a normal summon. So you can only do this during the main phase 1 or main phase 2, but only one of these. And one more thing I didn't say is you can actually choose to tribute to set. So if I tributed Crebones and Ambulance Roid, I could tribute both of those to set the Dark Magician if I wanted to. That obviously might put some fear in your opponent because they say, oh god, he tributed 2 monsters to summon to set that card. That's probably got a high defense, so that where the bluff might come in. Whereas actually, in this situation, if he did attack, he would kill it. But by doing so, that might put fear in him, and he might choose not to attack with it because he might take damage, which obviously you want to avoid for most cases, which I'll go over later on. But obviously, in this situation, unless you had a balls of steel and you wanted to bluff that, most people would choose to summon it in attack mode because it's got more attack, and I could attack over him because I've got 25, he's got 24, so my guy would win, he would be destroyed, D-Fissure would kick in, he would get banished over here, and he would take 100 points of damage. And that's basically everything I have to talk about in this episode. This was a very complicated, more advanced episode. But I hope you enjoyed it. So this is going to be the last part I record today. So the next video, I'm actually going to upload a duel. Yeah, that's it, a duel. A match, if you like, of me and my friend playing on here. And I'll take out the audio because we did a live commentary and I was talking over it. And I'll explain what's going on and the different thought processes of me playing different cards. So obviously it's going to be, I won't be using this deck because this was just a test to show you. So yeah, but I'll explain what's going on so you can see an example of what's happening. And you'll see in the duel that we have cards like Blackluster Soldier, Polymerization, cards like these don't see competitive play because they're not worthwhile playing because you use too many resources to summon one card, and cards that you use resources to summon or play aren't generally worthwhile because they're heavy costs, so they're not really worth it. So, but yeah, that's basically it. So I'll speak to you guys in the next episode. Again, just like any other episode, if you have any questions for me, let me know down below or PM me, and I'll be happy to answer them. So, as always, don't forget to like, subscribe. I hope you enjoyed, and if you have any questions, let me know, and I'll answer them in the next video. So until then, I'll speak to you guys later. Bye.